Good morning to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us for this special briefing on 9 years of Modi government. We have the privilege of having with us Honorable External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar to do the briefing on this occasion and take your questions. I'd also like to thank the presence of Honorable Ministers of State, Shri V. Muralidharan, Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, Shri R.R. Singh, as well as Foreign Secretary Shri Vinay Quatra on the dais. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Secretaries Shri Saurabh Kumar, Secretary CPV and OIA Dr. Asif Saeed, Secretary External Relations, Economic Relations Shri Dammu Ravi, as well as Special Secretary ER and DPA Shri Prabhat Kumar. So, may I request you to make opening remarks, after which we'll take. You can do it from there also, so that's convenient. So.
A very good morning to all of you, and my namaskar. Our ministers of state, our secretaries, and friends of the media. It's really a very great pleasure to talk to all of you today as we mark the completion of 9 years of the Modi government. I think most of you would not dispute that among the many areas where there's been a significant transformation, foreign policy would surely be among them. It's reflected in the country's higher standing, greater influence, bigger footprint, new concepts, and stronger delivery. Now, there are many ways by which one can judge how foreign policy has changed, how it has delivered, where has it made its deepest impact. I would like to pick two broad themes today as the metrics by which you can evaluate Indian foreign policy over the last 9 years. The first theme is, how does the world see India today? And the second is really, how has foreign policy affected the lives of the common citizen? So those are really the two perspectives from which I would like to present to you the foreign policy of the last 9 years. Now, in terms of how the world sees India today, I think you can't get a better set of people than those sitting on the podium to give you that view, because we travel out, we engage people on behalf of India, we talk to the leaderships in different places, since we travel around, we mix with many sections of society. So what, in a sense, I present to you is a accumulation of our collective experiences. And if I were to pick them, probably the one which I would start off with is how much today the world, especially the global south, perceives India as a development partner, as a credible, effective development partner with delivery on the ground. And I actually am just reminded of my last visit. I came back yesterday morning from Namibia. And I inaugurated formally a center of excellence in IT, which has been functioning there for about a year and a half. And the impact on the Technology University of Namibia by our giving a Param supercomputer, having trainers out there, working with them, developing cyber security skills, developing entrepreneurial skills, promoting research. I cannot describe to you the excitement in the university. Or I look at the trip before that, a very different place and a very different subject. I was in Guyana, and it so happened at that time we were delivering for the first time ever a ferry. A first time ever a ferry that far away to the continent, to the southern, to the western hemisphere, that too in the south. And the ferry had a transformational message for the Guyanese, because it made suddenly the islands and even the coastline far more accessible. So actually you had the entire Guyanese cabinet, the previous president, everybody really turn out, because for them it was such a big event. A little bit before that, I was in Mozambique, and I was urged to take a ride on a train which we had supplied. It wasn't just a train. We actually made possible the beginnings of a suburban rail system in Maputo, which would decongest that city, because the kind of trains and the price points and the quality that we did, that actually had a really a very big impact on the planning. I could give you many more examples. In Kenya, there's a textile factory which was closed down, which we helped to revive. Every Kenyan, if you use the word Rivatex, every Kenyan knows this textile factory. Or indeed, go to Mauritius. They are enormously proud of this Metro Express, which was built by an Indian company based on development support. And it isn't just my experience. I mean, my colleagues would vouch for something similar happening with them. Dr. Ranjan was telling me about a cardamom seed center, which he had seen in Laos. Or Muralidharanji was talking about entrepreneurship development centers, which he saw in Djibouti and I think in Rwanda. Am I correct? So wherever you go today, and I want you to understand today how big our development footprint is. It is today extending across 78 nations, and we have done more than 600 major projects. But most of all, the impact is actually in our own neighborhood. That if you look, we've just had the visit of Nepal's Prime Minister, and again, there was a stock taking of, and frankly, satisfaction at a lot of what has been achieved, a lot of new projects which are coming on stream. But if you look at the neighborhood at South Asia, in the last 9 years, whether it is power transmission, power generation, whether it is diesel supply, fuel supply, whether it is bridges, roads, railways, ICPs, actually the region is changing. Ferry, in the case of Maldives. So the first point I want to make to you is a large part of the world today sees us as a development partner, not just as a development partner who lives up to what Prime Minister enunciated as the Kampala principles, which is we do with our partners what is their priority. So it is, one part of it is the credibility, one part of it is also what is it we are doing. It is something which is important for them. They have determined what it is, or we have mutually determined what it is. And that, I think, today has very significantly enhanced our standing. The second image of India today is of an economic collaborator. An economic collaborator not just with the developing South, but with the global economy. And you can see that in terms of the FDI flows, in terms of the increased exports, in terms of actually this very important conversation taking place in the world today about trusted collaboration. I was in my last visit to the US, and Foreign Secretary has just come back, he's taken that forward. The American Semiconductor Association told me that to the best of their knowledge, they employ at least 40,000 engineers in India on chips design alone. And that's just the bit which they know. So the point I want to make here is, apart from development in terms of South-South, there is a larger economic impact we are making, and that is today increasingly recognized. And the third is really as a contributor. And perhaps there cannot be a better example of our contribution than Vaccine Maitri. I mean, even today, when you go around the world, actually people get emotional talking about the arrival of vaccines. The other example I would cite to you is our growing capability and our growing record as a first responder. We initially did more of this in our immediate neighborhood, but I think slowly with the passage of time that has extended beyond, and you saw really how speedy and effective we were in responding to the Turkey earthquake. Now, apart from these, I could cite to you the examples of the International Solar Alliance or the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure as examples where we have contributed. But we can also contribute in terms of economic stabilization. And you all saw what happened to Sri Lanka last year and this year. That at a time when much of the world sat on its hands, we actually stepped forward at a very, very crucial time to stabilize the Sri Lankan economy. And today, if it is on the mend, I think a large part of it is due to the fact that we responded in a timely manner. Now, beyond that, I've spoken about the development economic side, the contributions we make. We also bring value. And because we bring value, there is a lot of interest today in partnering with India or getting India to join an organization. So if you look at the last 9 years, you've had the Quad, you've had the I2U2, you had the Shanghai, our membership of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You've had bilaterally a lot of migration mobility agreements. You had the FIPEC platform. You had the Nordics format. You had our entry into export control regimes, because clearly our presence there has a additional value to their effectiveness. If I were to pick another facet, I would say we are also today narrative shapers. And perhaps the most effective example of that is the rush, I would say almost the pressure that we have each time Raisina dialogue is held. That today the people want to listen to India, they want to be seen with India, they do feel that working with us expands and sharpens their own influence as well. But it's not just a conference, it's also an important subject. You can see it on climate change. You could see it when PM went to Glasgow or to Paris. You can see it in counter-terrorism. The fact that the no money for terror actually got so much more traction after it was held in India. You can see it in a concept, how rapidly Indo-Pacific and Quad have taken root in the global strategic lexicon. You can see it in something like LIFE, which Prime Minister and UN Secretary General initiated last October. Or you could see it just in culture. In fact, Meenakshi ji was, every time she goes to Central Asia, and she was talking to me about her experience to Uzbekistan, that the impact today we are making, because we are proud of our traditions, others also are feeling that and wanting to absorb that in different ways. And they celebrate it along with us. Now, that picture which I put to you obviously has to be underpinned by politics. And here I think the last few years, if anything, have only underlined India's credentials, India's standing, India's DNA, I would say almost, as an independent force. Now, you're all aware of the debates in the last year about Ukraine and various ramifications. That's one example, I would say, of where we were clear from the very start about taking an independent stance, not just on the conflict itself, but on the various ramifications of that conflict. But I could share with you other examples. The Quad. Do remember, the Quad was first an idea which came about in 2007. And then in 2008, everybody buckled to pressure. 10 years later, when this time around we were doing Quad, it was not that there wasn't pressure. It was just that we didn't bend. So Quad too is an example of our independence, as indeed is the voice of Global South. We are the first G20 president who have actually made an effort to consult other people. And 125 countries responded because they believed we are an independent voice. So when I say, how does the world look at us? There can be no bigger endorsement of our standing than the manner in which 125 countries responded during the Voice of Global South. But it can also be on the ground. You know, when we stand up on our northern borders vis-a-vis China, when we take a clear stand on Belt and Road, those two are examples of our independence. That we are not swayed by either coercion or by inducements or by false narratives. So the facets of how the world looks at us obviously also is influenced by, to some extent, how we look after our own people. And during COVID, a lot of countries left their nationals to fend for themselves. I think we were the other extreme. No other country did as much as we did. We brought back directly during COVID itself at least 70 lakh people who in some way had been stranded or were compelled to come back to India. We also have in these 9 years created the systems for it. So there are systems for people to come back, but there are also systems to support them when they are abroad. So if Indians are in distress, the Indian Community Welfare Fund, the expansion of it and the repurposing of it, I think, was very, very useful during this COVID. And of course, most of all, you have seen these repeated operations. I mean, somehow it has happened from 2014. Almost every year, I mean, it's a reflection of the state of the world, that almost every year we have had to undertake some operation somewhere. It's a reflection of the world, but it's also a reflection of the globalization of India, that our people, I mean, I'm sure many of you would not have anticipated that we would have 5,000 nationals in Sudan, or that we had 20,000 students in Ukraine, or that we would have people stuck in South Sudan or even in Afghanistan as Kabul was falling. So I would say, it's one thing, of course, and I'll come to that, what difference it makes to our citizens. But I must also tell you, the world watches us. I mean, what we did in Ukraine was the subject of numerous conversations with my counterparts, and I've heard, people, presidents and prime ministers also speak to our own prime minister in that regard. But while we look after our own, we also take pride, and I think the world recognizes that we are genuinely international. We are international, and that is exhibited in what we are doing on climate action. What, as I said, we did on vaccines through Vaccine Maitri and through supply of medicines. What we are doing in terms of food, the millets, again, Namibia, they were very interested in working with us on production and expanding production and consumption of millets, or on counterterrorism, or on creating more reliable and resilient supply chains. First responder certainly highlights our credentials, or on maritime security. So if you look at the activities of India in different domains, yes, there is a strong sense this is a country today determined to look after the interests, its interests, the welfare of its people, but it is also a government very much committed to international, to global good, to internationalism. And I think that message too, it resonates particularly strongly in the South, but I think not only in the South. I think much of the world today appreciates it, and they actually see us in a way as a force of good. But while I speak about all of this, I think what really fascinates the world today is actually not what we are only doing in foreign policy. It is what we are doing in domestic policy. It is actually the huge domestic transformation, especially how we have today used the digital medium for the delivery of public goods and services. How we are today really transforming Indian society in terms of social development goals, the literacy missions, the gender effort, the Jal Jeevan mission, the electricity connections, the Swachh Bharat. I think these are today, and these are today, clearly for a lot of developing countries, this is an exemplar. But it's not, again, only developing countries. There are countries who actually look at it in terms of, one country, for example, which showed a lot of interest on the digital, on UPI, was Singapore. And already Singapore, I was told, more than $1 billion have come through the UPI system to India. Japan was very interested in UPI. When people looked today at the India stack, and if I were to move to the technology area at what we are doing on 4G, 5G, that interest is not just in the developing world, it's also equally in the developed world. So the domestic progress, I would say, that too has made, not that too, I would say that most of all, has made actually a huge impact on the thinking of the world. So after 9 years, I can really say without hesitation that in terms of our standing, in terms of where we are in global consciousness, it is something very much deeper than before. Now, let me say a few words about how the average citizen has benefited. I think to start with, the average citizen has seen enhanced security. If I were to start in the east, the land boundary agreement with Bangladesh particularly has had a transformational impact on the northeast. It has allowed progress. It has allowed, in fact, not just better law and order and stability in northeast, but also given northeast a connectivity through Bangladesh in this improved climate. The fact that I think we are countering Chinese actions on the northern borders, I think, has also enhanced security, as indeed the fact that we have delegitimized terrorism from across the Pakistani border. So today, I would say the activities of Indian diplomacy clearly have made the nation more secure. But they have also made the nation much more stronger economically. And again, I can cite to you different metrics for measuring that. It could be in greater exports, in bigger FDI flows, in stronger technology collaborations, in today in softening oil prices. Because had our diplomacy not done its work, I think it would have had an impact on the petrol pump. In fertilizer costs, that given how big, fertilizer is one of our key imports. So working with our counterparts there, we have actually stabilized the market and reached long-term agreements which definitely benefit the country and benefit Indian farmers. And between fertilizer, oil costs, I think it has an impact on inflation as well. And regionally, I would say particularly Northeast, I think economic activity in Northeast have definitely benefited from what Indian diplomacy has delivered. But another area where I think the common citizen has benefited is actually in greater mobility and greater opportunity abroad. I have spoken about the mobility agreements that we've done. We've done it now with a number of countries, with Portugal, with UK, just done with Germany, Austria, Australia. And where our workers or professionals go abroad, I think we have today much better systems for their welfare as well. And it's particularly important, as Mulli ji will tell you, in the Gulf, where actually the working conditions of people who go are much better as a result of agreements we've concluded. But underlying all of this is actually a great public service revolution we have done, and that is in the field of passports. In 2014, there were 77 passport seva kendras in the country. Since then, we added 16 Passport Seva Laghu Kendras and 430 Passport Seva Kendras located in post offices. So essentially what was below 100 today is in excess of 500. And the convenience to people, because we who live in cities still do not understand how hard it is just to get to a Passport Seva Kendra. So the fact that we have made the Passport Kendra, the servicing center, the collection center, the delivery center, so much more widely distributed in this country, that has had a huge impact. And if you look at passport figures, we were issuing less than 9 million passports, 8.7 actually, in 2014. Today we are issuing more than 14 million passports. And one of the only reason we are doing 14 is that we have to ramp up the capability, and actually the faster we process it, we are very confident this demand will keep going up. And one part of it is we are making it easier to get passports. I mean, I think your personal experiences would tell you that it has actually, the speed at which you get it is significantly better than what it was a decade ago. But it's also happened abroad, because remember, we render more than 1 million passport services out of the country. And out of the country before, the time period was enormous because you had to go through a cumbersome process of checking. Today, actually, because there is a database called GPSP, that it is possible, and 181 embassies and consulates are connected. There are a few who still have to be done. But even replacement or renewal of passports abroad has become very much easier. So whether it is the ability to travel abroad, the mobility agreements, the totalization issues we are pushing, the specialized skilled workers which we are giving access to, I think these today have been a change. A fourth area, of course, is in technology capabilities. And I think the more we collaborate globally in technology, it could be G2G, it could be B2B, it could be G2B, it could be best practices, it could be projects. So the combination of all of this, you can see there's a very conscious drive for technology upgrades, and that is today actually opening many new opportunities for the youth, especially for the youth of this country. The fourth is, of course, security abroad. I have spoken about multiple operations. The Indian Community Welfare Fund, the consular services, even something like students. Today, students know that whether it is their legitimate case for working hours or other difficulties that they face, sometimes even security issues, that the government of India will back them up, and back them up perhaps in a manner in which we didn't do before. And finally, I would say there is a cultural respect for us today. There is a cultural respect, and there are a variety of reasons for it. Part of it is also that we ourselves have globalized many of our practices. I think the International Day of Yoga is not just a shared celebration. I think it's also a shared understanding of what is happening in India. And that is extending to other fields, could be Ayurveda, it could be, in a way, our way of life. So anybody going out today, I think an Indian going out today is more likely to be, in a sense, understood by the rest of the world. And all of this, I'm not suggesting, is only due to government efforts. I think there are a lot of other independent processes in play. But certainly we help to guide it, channel it, encourage it. So if this is the picture I present to you, I would like to end very briefly with my sense of what has changed in 9 years. Why has this happened? I think it has happened, first of all, because where foreign policy is concerned, starting from day one, when you saw the leaders of our neighbors present at the oath taking of the Council of Ministers in 2014, starting from day one till now, there has been strategic clarity. There has been strategic clarity in terms of understanding the world, in organizing ourselves into a neighborhood first circle, extended neighborhoods, the Sagar, Africa beyond, the major powers. So how we perceive the world and how we interact with the world and how we develop policies for each of those and for combinations of these, I think that is to me a number one reason. And along with that, in this phrase which has been used, hesitations of history, that we are no longer a prisoner of our past. That if there are gains to the country, if there are benefits for our citizens, we are not held back because of ideological reservations. Along with that, I would say the strategic communication, that we are able, probably if you look at us, I would say not only us ministers, but even the secretaries or probably my colleagues who are in different MEA buildings, we are far more intensely active and interactive than those before us. I'm not in any way disrespecting those people. I think it is partly the situation. It is the big picture, the requirements of vote bank politics, why anybody would do this. Because if you look at their history, I mean, you would imagine that they learn by the history and they wouldn't like to repeat their history. So it isn't only one incident, however egregious it may be. I think there is a larger underlying issue about the space which is given to separatists, to extremists, to people who advocate violence. And I think it's not good for the relationship, and I think it's not good for Canada. जो आपका जो सवाल था वो राहुल गांधी वाला, देखिए उनकी आदत है कि वो जब बाहर जाते हैं कि वो देश की आलोचना करते हैं, हमारी राजनीति के बारे में टिप्पणी करते हैं, पर जो आपका प्रश्न है कि दूसरों पे इसका क्या असर पड़ता है। अब दुनिया हमें देख रही है, और दुनिया क्या देख रही है? दुनिया देख रही है कि इस देश में चुनाव होते हैं, चुनाव में कभी एक पार्टी जीतती है, कभी दूसरी पार्टी जीतती है। तो अगर देश में डेमोक्रेसी नहीं है तो ये ऐसा परिवर्तन तो आना नहीं चाहिए ना। हर चुनाव का रिजल्ट एक ही होना चाहिए। वैसे 24 का चुनाव रिजल्ट तो वही होगा, हमें पता है, हाँ। पर अगर आप देखें जो ये पूरा नैरेटिव जो है, ये हमारे यहाँ एक देश में नैरेटिव बना है, और जब ये नैरेटिव देश में नहीं चलता या कम चलता है तो इसको बाहर ले जाते हैं, और उनकी अपेक्षा है कि बाहर का सपोर्ट जो है वो देश में चलेगा। मुझे लगता है कि यहाँ आम नागरिक जो है, जो देखिए हमारे यहाँ जितने भी आप बीच में, हमारे यहाँ डेमोक्रेसी है, आपका कुछ भी होगा, मेरा कुछ भी होगा, आपकी पॉलिटिक्स कुछ होगी, हमारी कुछ होगी। हमें देश में जो करें मुझे इसमें कोई इतराज़ नहीं, पर मुझे नहीं लगता कि बाहर जाके देश की पॉलिटिक्स को बाहर ले जाना देश के हित में नहीं, और मुझे नहीं लगता कि उनकी क्रेडिबिलिटी उसके कारण बढ़ेगी। द क्वेश्चन चाइना, look, I said our relationship with all the major power centers, you can say, have evolved, because that is the record. I mean, you look at the US, look at Russia, even in these, with all these challenges, look at UK, France, look at EU, Germany, Japan, or if you take regions, Gulf, ASEAN, each one of these have advanced. And why have they advanced? They didn't advance by gravity and by nature. They advanced because people worked very hard. That in each of these relationships, actually the Modi government has striven, it has put in place policies. The Prime Minister himself has sort of led the diplomatic efforts from the front. That we have tried to find areas of agreement, of collaboration, of working together with these countries. We have tried to expand the economic base, the technology base, tried to find security partners, and we have been largely successful. Now, why the exception? Well, in a sense, that answer can only be given by China, because China consciously, for some reason, chose in 2020 to, breaking agreements to move forces to the border areas and, seek to coerce us. So, I think, it's been made very clear to them that until there is peace and tranquility in the border areas, our relationship cannot progress. So that is the obstacle which is holding that back.
Thank you, sir.
सर, मैं मनीष झा हूँ TV9 भारतवर्ष से। सर इधर सर, मेरा सवाल ये है कि रूस यूक्रेन युद्ध में इंडिया का स्टैंड और आपके जो स्टेटमेंट हैं वो बहुत सारे जो दूसरे देश हैं उनके डिप्लोमेट्स ने भी काफ़ी सराहा, उन लोगों ने भी काफ़ी अप्रिसिएट किया कि आपने जिस तरह से स्टैंड लिया, चाहे वो यूरोपियन प्लेटफॉर्म पर भी। लेकिन सबसे बड़ी चिंता ये है कि इस युद्ध की वजह से चाइना का बहुत ज़्यादा रूस के साथ रिलेशन स्ट्रांग हो गया है। कल ही उसके आर्मर्ड व्हीकल रूस में दिखाई दिए हैं, इससे पहले ड्रोन वगैरह आ रहे थे, इकोनॉमी में काफ़ी इन्वॉल्वमेंट हो गई है। तो वैसे स्थिति में आपको नहीं लगता है कि कल के दिन में भारत और रूस का रिलेशन पर प्रभाव पड़ेगा, खास करके तब जब हम क्वाड में भी उतना ही एक्टिव हैं? तो कैसे इसको आप न्यूट्रलाइज करेंगे? थैंक यू
सर। प्रणय उपाध्याय, एबीपी न्यूज़ से। सर, मेरा सवाल इस चीज़ को लेकर है कि आपने 2014 के अंदर इस चीज़ के साथ शुरुआत की कि पड़ोसियों को साथ लिया जाए, नेबरहुड फर्स्ट की पॉलिसी के साथ। भारत की नेबरहुड के अंदर चाइना और पाकिस्तान, दो नेबर्स के साथ में रिलेशन डिफिकल्ट रही है। आप नेबरहुड पॉलिसी के लिए किन को फॉल्ट लाइन मानते हैं और कहां पर आपको लगता है कि जो आपके एरियाज ऑफ चैलेंज हैं जिसके ऊपर आप काम करना चाहेंगे?
संजय।
Sir, times now. You spoke about the northern border. You mentioned what happened in 2020. You said that unless there is a change from Beijing's side, you cannot, unless there is peace and tranquility, the relationship cannot move forward. But as of now, what do you see happening in the sense, do you see any kind of meetings between strategic representatives? Do you see any attempt by China at de-escalation, which comes after disengagement? There are too little bits of disengagement still left. What is the future, sir?
आपका जो पहला सवाल जो था यूक्रेन के बारे में, जो सवाल जो था, देखिए, जो यूक्रेन में जो युद्ध जो चल रहा है उसके अलग अलग जो दुनिया उसका असर जो दुनिया पर है, ये अलग अलग रीजन्स में, अलग अलग देशों में उसका अपना प्रभाव होता है। अब रशिया और किसी और देश, चाइना हो या कोई और देश हो, अब उनके रिश्ते और नज़दीकी होंगे या दूर के होंगे, वो खुद तय करेंगे। हमारा रिश्ता जो रशिया के साथ अगर आप देखें, 1955 के बाद जब क्रुश्चेव और बुल्गेरियन आए थे यहाँ, जब वीटो पहली बार उन्होंने यूनाइटेड नेशंस में भारत का समर्थन किया था, उस टाइम हमारे रिश्ते जो हैं वो बहुत ही स्टेडी रहे। और इस दौरान दुनिया में बहुत बड़े परिवर्तन आए। माने सोवियत संघ टूट चुका था, कोल्ड वॉर आया, कोल्ड वॉर गया, यूनिपोलर आया, वो भी गया, यूरोप यूनिफाई हुआ। और आपस में अगर देखें रशिया चाइना के रिलेशन, रशिया यूएस के, रशिया यूरोप के, इन सब संबंधों में माने कहीं अप और डाउन होता रहा। हमारे संबंध जो हैं बहुत ही स्टडी रहे हैं। और इसके कारण हैं क्योंकि एक दोनों देशों में एक तो लीडरशिप इसकी जो महत्व को समझती है, पब्लिक सेंटिमेंट भी साथ देती है। हम दोनों के यहाँ ये समझ है कि हम दोनों बड़े यूरेशियन देश हैं, पूरा यूरेशिया की स्टेबिलिटी एक किस्म से हम पे निर्भर है, हमारे रिश्तों पे निर्भर। तो जो आप कह रहे हैं, हाँ, ऐसी एनालिसिस मैं पढ़ता रहता हूँ, पर आप हकीकत देखें ना कि हमने पिछले साल में भी ऐसा कुछ रिश्तों को ऐसा कुछ होने नहीं दिया जिसके कारण कुछ प्रश्न चिन्ह उठे हमारे बारे में। तो ये मेरा उत्तर है आपके लिए। दूसरा जो है नेबरहुड फर्स्ट जो आप पूछ रहे थे, जो रिपोर्ट कार्ड मैंने आप लोगों के सामने प्रस्तुत किया है, उसमें सबसे ज़्यादा अगर आप देखें, सबसे हमारी प्रगति भी नेबरहुड में हुई है, हमारी चुनौतियां भी नेबरहुड में, तो दोनों हैं साथ साथ। कि बाकी नेबर्स के साथ नेपाल, बांग्लादेश, मालदीव, श्रीलंका, भूटान, इवन म्यांमार, आप देखें पॉलिटिकल रिलेशंस आर स्ट्रॉन्ग, रीजनल कनेक्टिविटी, माने एक किस्म से एक रीजनल, एक पहली बार यहाँ एक रीजनल इकोनॉमी बन रही है। क्योंकि जब एक देश से दूसरे देश पेट्रोल जाता है, बिजली जाती है, सड़कें जाती हैं, रेलगाड़ियाँ जाती हैं, आज जो हैं हम बांग्लादेश के बंदरगाहों के उपयोग कर सकते हैं, जो एक बहुत बड़ी नई बात। तो एक लेवल पे मैं कहूँगा प्रोग्रेस रिपोर्ट में बहुत सफलता मैं आपको दिखा सकता हूँ, पर जहाँ चुनौती है एक तो पाकिस्तान के साथ है, और ये माने ये कोई नया विषय नहीं है, शुरू से ये क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म माने उसकी चुनौती थी। और फ़र्क ये है कि हम जो हैं इसको बर्दाश्त करने के लिए तैयार नहीं हैं। तो या तो आप कहें कि नेबरहुड फर्स्ट के कारण हम टेररिज्म को साइड में रखें और पाकिस्तान के साथ कोऑपरेशन बढ़ाते जाएं, ये ना तो देश की सेंटिमेंट है ना मोदी गवर्नमेंट की सोच है। तो इसमें अगर पाकिस्तान रिश्तों को आगे ले जाना चाहता है, उनको पता है क्या करना है, इसमें कोई माने उनको पता है, दुनिया को पता है। और जो चाइना का जो है, जैसे मैंने अभी उनको समझाया, हमारी कोशिश थी कि चाइना के साथ, हमारे पड़ोसी हैं, देश के सबसे बड़े इकोनॉमी हैं, और हम तो चाहेंगे कि रिश्ते अच्छे हों, पर रिश्ते तभी अच्छे हो सकते हैं जब बॉर्डर एरिया में पीस और ट्रैंक्विलिटी हो, और जब कोई अग्रीमेंट हो तो उसका पालन होना चाहिए। तो अगर अग्रीमेंट का उल्लंघन हुआ और आपने पीस और ट्रैंक्विलिटी को कहीं छोड़ दिया, तो आप ही बताइए कि रिश्तों को कैसे आगे ले जाए। तो चाइना के साथ जो टाइम्स नाउ का सवाल जो है, सी वी आर टॉकिंग, it is not that communications have broken down. So Sanjay, I'm responding to you. So the point is that with China, in fact, even on the day, even before Galwan happened, we were, talking to the Chinese, saying that, look, we are seeing movements of your forces, which in our view is violative of our understanding. The day after Galwan happened, in fact, the morning after, I actually spoke to my counterpart. And since then we have engaged, the military commanders have engaged, our embassies have engaged, I have engaged with my counterpart, and I continue to do that. When Foreign Minister Chingang was here in Goa, we had a long discussion. Even when I was in BRICS, he did not come, his deputy came. We had a chat on the side. Look, we have to, the two of us have to find a way of disengaging, because I don't believe that this present impasse serves China's interest either. The fact is the relationship is impacted, and the relationship will continue to be impacted. If there is any expectation that somehow we will normalize while the border situation is not normal, that's not a well-founded expectation. So your question, what do you, what can we expect? Look, at multilateral events, we will obviously the Chinese are there and we are there. It is likely that there would be a conversation between us. Bilaterally, I mean, since Galwan happened, we've had one visit by Mr. Wangi to India, but I think the main mechanisms, we have a mechanism called WMCC. And we have a mechanism called Senior High-Level Commanders Meeting. One is a kind of military-led with MEA in it. The other is MEA-led with military in it. These mechanisms continue to do the work, because at the end of the day, disengagement is a very detailed process. It's not something which is a kind of obviously you have to have a leadership level buy-in, but the details of it have to be worked out by people on the ground. So I think all of this would continue to happen.
Kavita.
सर गुड मॉर्निंग, मैं कविता जोशी हूँ सर, हरिभूमि न्यूज़पेपर से। सर मेरा सवाल ये है, अभी आपने अपने ओपनिंग रिमार्क्स में दो चीज़ों की बात की थी अपने नेबरहुड के लिए, जो नेबरिंग कंट्रीज़ हैं इंडिया के। एक तो आपने कहा कि स्ट्रेटजिक क्लैरिटी, और एक आपने कहा स्ट्रेटजिक कम्युनिकेशन इंडिया का बहुत ही साउंड हुआ है। मेरा सवाल ये है कि अभी कुछ दिन पहले प्रधानमंत्री ने पार्लियामेंट की नई बिल्डिंग का इनॉग्रेशन किया है, उसमें एक नक्शा लगा हुआ है जिसे अखंड भारत कहा जा रहा है। उसे लेकर के आपके पड़ोसी देशों में, 3 देशों में, नेपाल, बांग्लादेश और पाकिस्तान में विवाद है। 2 मित्र देश हैं भारत के, और पाकिस्तान हमारा शत्रु राष्ट्र है। तो सर ये मैं आपसे पूछना चाहती हूँ कि एक तो ये जो अखंड भारत को लेकर के विवाद है, इसमें भारत का क्या कहना है अपने पड़ोसी देशों को, और जैसे कि कल नेपाल के प्रधानमंत्री ने वहाँ की पार्लियामेंट में ये कहा है कि मैंने ये मुद्दा अपनी भारत यात्रा के दौरान उठाया था, जिसके जवाब में मुझे भारतीय पक्ष ने ये कहा है कि ये राजनीतिक नक्शा नहीं है, ये सांस्कृतिक नक्शा है। तो ये जवाब आपका केवल अपने मित्र राष्ट्रों के लिए है, जैसे नेपाल और बांग्लादेश, क्योंकि इसमें पीओके का भी हिस्सा है और पीओके को लेकर के भारत का जो स्टैंड है वो बहुत ही अलग स्टैंड रहा है। हम हमेशा ही ये कहते रहे हैं कि पीओके अवैध कब्जा है पाकिस्तान का और भारत उसको अधिकार क्षेत्र में कभी भी लेगा। तो ये जो आपका जो एक तो ये क्लैरिटी करें कि जवाब आपका यही है कि
छोटा रखें जरा
सांस्कृतिक है,
question।
राजनीतिक है, और
अपना
पीओके को
speech।
लेकर पाकिस्तान को लेकर क्या संदेश है?
Smita, go ahead.
Mr. Smita Sharma, I work independently. Just wanted to check, is India expecting President Zelensky to be in attendance during the G20 summit? Is there an invitation that has been extended, is being extended? And
Can we
Okay.
keep it tight? Yeah. Umashankar.
मैं उमाशंकर हूँ एनडीटीवी से। आपने दुनिया के परिप्रेक्ष्य में बताया कि 2014 के बाद किस तरह से भारत का फुटप्रिंट जो है वो बढ़ा है दुनिया में। मेरा सवाल स्पेसिफिकली मिडिल ईस्ट को लेकर है कि 2014 के बाद किस तरीके से मिडिल ईस्ट में को लेकर हमारी जो डिप्लोमेसी है वो बदली है और क्या अचीवमेंट्स रहे हैं।
एक तो जो आपने विषय उठाया, जो नए संसद में जो नक्शा जो दिखाया गया, मेरे ख्याल से हमारे प्रवक्ता जो हैं इस पे टिप्पणी कर चुके हैं। एम आई करेक्ट? हाँ, कि उन्होंने कहा कि ये अगर आप उसी के नीचे वो कुछ साइन बोर्ड जैसा कुछ लगा हुआ है, उसमें लिखा है कि ये आई थिंक यू कैन रीड माय रिकलेक्शन, ये कुछ अशोकन एम्पायर का डिस्क्रिप्शन है। तो ये एक ऐतिहासिक जो लिखा है, इट सेज इट डिपिक्ट्स द स्प्रेड ऑफ द अशोकन एम्पायर एंड द आइडिया ऑफ रिस्पॉन्सिबल एंड पीपल ओरिएंटेड गवर्नेंस दैट ही अडॉप्टेड। तो इसको मुझे नहीं लगता कि राजनीतिक विषय बनना ही चाहिए, और जो हमारे मित्र देश जो हैं वो समझेंगे। अगर कहीं कुछ उनको क्लैरिफिकेशन चाहिए तो मुझे लगता है उसमें कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है, और जो मुझे जो बताया गया है वो समझ चुके हैं। अब पाकिस्तान का तो आप छोड़ ही दीजिए, क्योंकि वहाँ ना समझने की आशा है ना हमारे यहाँ। अब मैं क्या कहूँ आपको, पर जो पीओके का विषय वो अलग विषय, क्योंकि पीओके में जो है हमारा स्टैंड बहुत क्लियर है, और हम ये खाली सरकार का स्टैंड नहीं है, पूरे देश का स्टैंड है, पार्लियामेंट का स्टैंड। तो उसमें माने पार्लियामेंट का स्टैंड है, तो उसमें कोई चेंज करने की माने पॉसिबिलिटी है ही नहीं। जो योर क्वेश्चन Zelensky and G20, no, look, in our view, G20 participation is for members of G20 and for the countries and organizations who we have invited to the G20, and that list we had declared as soon as we assumed the presidency of the G20. So it is not something that we have reviewed, and it is not something, very honestly, which we have discussed with anybody. The third question जो आपका जो मिडल ईस्ट का सवाल जो है, वो अगर जो मैं पिछले 10 साल की सफलता की अगर जब मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, तो मिडल ईस्ट ये एक ऐसा क्षेत्र है जहाँ ये आपको साफ दिखाई देता है कि अगर आप खाड़ी में देखें, ऐसे देश हैं जहाँ माने सालों से कोई हमारे यहाँ से कोई लीडरशिप विजिट नहीं हुई थी। हाँ, और जो हमारे लिए एक किस्म से हमारे लोग वहाँ सर्विस करने जाते थे, और वहाँ से हम लोग पेट्रोल खरीदते थे, तेल खरीदते थे। तो पिछले 10 साल में जो परिवर्तन जो आया है कि पॉलिटिकल लेवल में एक तो एंगेजमेंट बढ़ी है, बहुत कंफर्ट है हमारे। अब अगर आज हम दुनिया में देख के अपने मन में सोचते हैं कि कहाँ देश हैं जो हमें सपोर्ट करते हैं, उसमें से बहुत सारे देश जो हैं वो मिडल ईस्ट के देश। और मिडल ईस्ट के देश अगर हम दोनों जो हैं एमओएस डायरेक्टली उसको देखते हैं, मेरे ख्याल से गल्फ में तो हम आई थिंक ईच वन ऑफ अस वुड हैव पेड एटलीस्ट 2, 3, 4, 5 विजिट्स। और जो बाकी देश भी हैं, मैं इजिप्ट गया हूँ, मैं टूनिशिया गया हूँ, आप तो आई थिंक यू हैव बीन टू इराक, टू मोरक्को, अल्जीरिया। तो एंगेजमेंट उनके साथ बढ़ा है, राजनीतिक परिप्रेक्ष्य से हमारे रिश्ते जो हैं और नज़दीक आए हैं। तो और जो अगर आप ट्रेड देखें वहाँ एक FTA भी हो चुका है UAE के साथ, व्यापार भी इस समय में पिछले 10 साल में काफ़ी बड़ा है। तो मैं कहूँगा हर दृष्टिकोण से ये जरूर ये एरिया जो है हमारे लिए एक किस्म से डिप्लोमेसी, सक्सेसफुल डिप्लोमेसी का एक उदाहरण है।
Sachin.
Good morning. This is Sachin from the Times of India. Yeah, Minister, I just want to draw your attention to this press conference which was done by former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, I think in early 2014. And he was asked a question about what was his biggest achievement as the Prime Minister. So he said that the end of the nuclear apartheid in the form of the nuclear deal with against India in the form of the nuclear deal with the US was his best moment as Prime Minister. So I was just wondering if you would like to pinpoint something, you know, as Prime Minister Modi's own best moment or the government's own best moment or a standout achievement in terms of foreign policy. And just as a follow-up to that, since we've already listed all the achievements which are quite impressive, I just want to ask you if there's any regret or disappointment about something that you could have achieved and it did not happen in the past nine years. For example, India's bid to become a membership, to get a membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group.
I mean, we are here to hear
the fact that it did not happen.
Not the
I told Smita one question, you asked 5.
So,
I think you are.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Madhuren.
सर, मैं मधुरेंद्र न्यूज़ नेशन से। मेरा सवाल LSE को ही लेकर है। आज से एक हफ्ते बाद गलवान की घटना के 3 साल पूरे हो रहे हैं। पिछले 3 सालों से अगर देखा जाए तो एक बड़ा विवाद और नैरेटिव के तौर पे पब्लिक माइंडसेट में रहा है कि क्या चीन ने हमारी ज़मीन पर कब्जा किया है या नहीं किया है। उस पर मैं चाहूँगा आपका स्पष्टीकरण, ये जानते हुए कि 2 पॉइंट पर डिसएग्रीमेंट हुआ है, 2 पॉइंट पर अभी निगोशिएशंस चल रहे हैं। और एक छोटा दूसरा सवाल है,
बिल्कुल नहीं, सॉरी,
कि पब्लिक आउटरीच आज से शुरू हो रहा है आपका, तो क्या 5 उपलब्धियों को लेकर पब्लिक के बीच आप जा रहे हैं?
करो, आपका टाइम
अगर आप
कम कर
एक
रहे हो।
सवाल से ज़्यादा भी पूछेंगे मैं एक ही का उत्तर
आदित्य।
Minister Jayashankar, Aditya Raj call from TV9 Network. In the last 9 years, we've seen a paradigm shift in Kashmir policy of the government of India. We've seen Article 370 abrogation and a lot of steps. Recently concluded successful G20 event. How do you see this? How do you see this? And do you think this is a turning point on how the global community and the international diaspora and several others, especially the West, sees Kashmir from a different lens? Because you just spoke about changing narratives. And India actually shaping the narratives. So how important is this visit?
Keep it short.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
So let me start with Sachin. Look, you said that Dr. Manmohan Singh at the end of his tenure said what he said. Prime Minister Modi has a long way to go in his tenure. So I'm sure as and when that arises, he will say what he has to say, but I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But if you were to ask me, at this point of time, 9 years into Modi government, what are all the changes? I think in a way I tried to project that, I tried to project, frankly, a more self-assured country with a lot of changes happening, which is contributing more, which is caring more for its own people at home and people abroad, and which is communicating all of this very effectively with the rest of the world. So it isn't a single account and a single achievement in a way. I think there's been really very broad progress across multiple fields. And even though you should not have asked the second question, but on Security Council, you all know where is the resistance from, but I would say one change which has happened is, if you today ask more and more countries today accept the need for reform, and frankly feel if there's one country which should be there, it is India. I think even in this process as a potential candidate, our credibility has gone up in this period. जो आपका जो गलवान वाला सवाल है, देखिए जो पोजीशन जो है ये बहुत कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है, क्योंकि हमारी फ़ौज भी, एक तो मैं आपको समझाना चाहता हूँ कि नॉर्मली जो है फ़ौज जो वो बिल्कुल LAC पे डिप्लॉय नहीं होती, वो अपने कैंप पे डिप्लॉय होते हैं, कैंप से आगे बढ़ते हैं। जो 2020 के बाद जो चेंज हुआ है, क्योंकि टेंशन तनाव के कारण दोनों साइड ने फॉरवर्ड डिप्लॉयमेंट की, और ये फॉरवर्ड डिप्लॉयमेंट, ये मुद्दा जो है हमें इसको रिजॉल्व करना है। तो ये जो जिस तरीके से आपने ये प्रश्न पूछा कि ज़मीन का है या नहीं है, वो इशू नहीं है, इशू फॉरवर्ड डिप्लॉयमेंट का है कि दोनों लोग बहुत एक दूसरे के बहुत नज़दीक फॉरवर्ड डिप्लॉयमेंट कर रहे हैं, और उसके कारण ये तनाव माने कहीं हिंसा की तरफ जा सकता है, जैसे आपने गलवान में देखा था। जो आपका सवाल जो है अनुच्छेद 370 वाला ऑन कश्मीर, first of all, I do think that what was done in 2019 was a very, very crucial step and a long-awaited step for national security. Because in a way, we can, I mean, it's a long story and you know this better than me, why 370 was kept beyond what was supposed to be its shelf life. But the bottom line was, I'm now giving you a kind of a diplomatic perspective. The whole world used it against us. They saw it as a point of vulnerability. They saw it as something they should keep pressing and keep using and keep turning as a way of keeping India off balance. Now, if we don't get it right, how do you expect the world to get it right? So, for us, the first thing was to remediate at home. And that is what we did in 2019. Now, once you sorted it out at home, then the question was, how then does the world react to it? Now, even when 370 happened, and fact was, in 2019, we had to actually, when I speak about strategic communication, as a foreign ministry, as a minister myself at that time, we spent a lot of time getting people to understand what it was about. And our biggest problem was a lot of, frankly, false narratives or propaganda, much of which originated in our own country. So we had to deal with that, and I think we dealt with it. And because we dealt with it today, if you go around the world today and ask people, sort of, when it comes to India, what are your concerns, you will find more and more people actually will say that's kind of, that's not something which is a live issue, because we were the people who kept it as a live issue. So to me, what happened in G20 is just one example. But I would like to see, quite honestly, more investment there, more foreign tourists there. I see no reason why Jammu and Kashmir should be denied the benefits not only of development, but of globalization that the rest of India has experienced. I think it is their right, and I think we should promote that very strongly.
Huma. Right here.
Sir, I'm Huma Siddiqui from the Financial Express. In your opening statement, you did not mention anything about the Latin American region except the ferry to Guyana. And so in that context, I just wanted to understand, is India looking at buying crude from Venezuela anytime